we're talking about the AIDA model or the AIDA model. AIDA simply stands for attention, interest, desire, action. It's not a new thing. This is a framework developed in 1898 by a guy called I think it's St. Elmo Lewis. But let's just say Elmo Lewis. And it was actually initially designed for selling in person, door-to-door salespeople, that sort of thing. It's still widely adopted. It's still being used by brands today. It's one of those sort of mainstays in marketing that have been the same from the door-to-door salesman age all the way through telephone, catalog marketing, all the way through to today, where we're working in what we now call marketing funnels or sales funnels or whatever the case may be. Those are all still the same thing. The funnel still works on the same principle. In fact, this can basically be juxtaposed or superimposed directly on the funnel methodology, and it still applies perfectly. So at the top of the funnel, you'd want to generate attention or use attention to generate traffic. Middle of the funnel, you'd want to have interest and desire. And then bottom of the funnel, you want them to take action. So it's pretty much the exact same thing. So it's the 4 stages that a consumer goes through when they decide to make a purchase decision. And the principles are relevant to everything that we do, how we make social posts, how we design landing pages, how we do Google ads. And the question that you've got to ask yourself is, and I'm going to relate this back to our talk on lead generation and those 3 phases in B2B marketing, which is target audience, key message, channels, and touch points. So when you're building the channels and touch points or the customer journey, these goals are there. So you've got attention, then interest and desire, and then action. And we actually lay it out a little bit more granular. So we actually split attention up a little bit. We split interest up a little bit. We split desire up a little bit. And then we get to action. And then we've actually got a phase after action where we talk about loyalty and advocacy, right? So this is a simplified model of that. But when you're making content, you should ask yourself, where in this customer journey is the client going to encounter this touch point? So is it a random person browsing the internet, doing a Google search, and now what pops up? Is it a Google ad that's popping up? Well, this person's never heard of us. So it needs to be an attention-grabbing Google ad, right? Rowan, if you're making an ad, you need to ask yourself, am I just doing this based on the keywords? Or am I using my headlines and my call-outs and my extensions to actually pull attention and say, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Let me click on this, right? And so you can actually think about this as being very modular as well and scalable. So it's almost fractal in its nature. I think about it as being fractal because when you're just looking at that ad, it pulls your attention. You're interested, you think that it's something you could desire, and then you take action by clicking. But then the whole process starts again because you're sort of now moving more towards the interest portion because you have now clicked, they've got your attention, but now the process starts again because on that landing page, there's an attention, interest, desire, action with more of a focus on interest. And then they might move on and browse towards the product page, the product offer page, and it begins again. Right, you've got your attention, you've got your interest, but now my focus is a lot more on desire. How do I discuss the features? How do I discuss the benefits? How do I discuss the social proof? How do I create FOMO? All of those sorts of things. How do I remove FUD, right? FOMO, fear of missing out, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And then finally, the action phase where they then decide to click or buy or complete a form or send an email, but they are taking an action to secure that product for themselves. And so the AIDA principles can really be applied in a fractal sense, but also in a strategic sense across the entire life cycle or across this entire customer journey. Ideally, the content will attract attention to a brand. It would then generate the interest in a product or a service and then stimulate the desire for that product or service and ultimately lead to an action. So here it is laid out as a marketing funnel that we're more used to. So just very simply, it's a hierarchy of effects with a diminishing quantity of interested buyers. So when you're doing the attention phase, you might get attention from 1 million people, but only 100,000 of those will actually be interested in the product that you're selling. And out of those 100,000, maybe only 10,000 will end up desiring the product. And out of those 10,000, only 1,000 will actually end up buying. So out of 1 million, you might only get 1,000 sales, And that's perfectly fine. That sort of 1000x model where if you want 1,000 sales, you need to get 1,000 times 1,000 attentions, if we could call it that, or people being attracted to the website. So that's why we get something like a click-through rate of 1% or 10%, but very rarely above 10%, right? It's because not everyone's going to be interested. So they might pay attention for a second, but they might not be interested. And that's fine because they're not our clients. And that's why relevance is so important in the articles that we write. Because if we're sending this out and it's not even gathering attention and there's no interest in the articles that we write, what's the point of the work that we're doing? Right. So moving on, the AIDA model is created with both design elements and copy. Keep that in mind. So there's always two elements to this. And in fact, there are even other things like, the spoken word and video and all sorts of things like that come into play. And I think it's our job to really think about the specific message that will get them from grabbing their attention, the specific message that'll make them go, okay, I like this, the specific message that'll say, or have them say, oh, I want it. And then finally to the action of saying, I'm going to get it, buy it. And think about your own lives. This is the great thing about marketing and why pretty much anyone can go into marketing if you want. The great thing about marketing is we are all being marketed to all the time. We are all consumers. And so we've all bought something in our lives. And so we've all gone through this process. If you're introspective enough, you can actually look at that process and say, how was that applied to me? How could it have been done better? Let me go and do it in a better way. Okay, so then moving on, the first stage obviously is the attention phase. I'm going to drill down into each phase. Today, we're just going to do attention and interest, trying to keep things to the point. And then next week, we'll do the desire and action phases. So in the attention phase, you really want to make the potential customer aware of the brand or product. And you do that by having something that grabs their attention. And once the content has grabbed their attention, you want them to engage with it and become curious. So grab their attention, surprise, delight, disgust, humor, fear. There's a whole bunch of ways to do it. Have you guys seen people printing the billboards upside down? You've seen that?
I think I've seen one. Yeah.
You see it all the time. The reason why they do that is because they are in the attention phase of that key messaging. And you'll notice that those billboards have very little text on them, but the logo is still the logo. And oftentimes these marketers will do the stupidest thing where they print the billboard upside down, but they leave the logo the right side up. And then consumers aren't stupid because they look at it and they go, yes, see, another cheeky attention grab. And it kind of feels like cheating. At least that's how I feel about it. I feel like it's people cheating in that capacity. So I rarely pay attention to it. The last one I saw, I think, was CarPoint, trying to compete against cars.co.today. But that's a way for people to sort of grab your attention. Why do they print it upside down? Well, it's because you think you've seen someone making a big mistake, right? So there's that sort of schadenfreude that happens where you're like, oh, look, that person misprinted that thing, ha, ha, ha. But actually, they've achieved their goal because they've got your attention. And that's all they really wanted to do. Really, all we want to do is grab their attention. And once we have their attention, make them curious. Get them to ask the question, what the hell's going on? Oh, that's interesting. Let me move on to the interest phase. So once you've got their attention, the thing that links attention to interest is curiosity. And the goal is to get the client to ask, what is it? What is really going on? If content is created that solves the visitor's problems and focuses on their passions, we'll be able to draw them in and provide a solution. When executed effectively, the target audience should be able to discover your content through Google, social media, and other channels. Short and captivating headlines using vital keywords at the beginning of titles rather than in the middle or at the end of them. So think about this. Short and captivating headlines using vital keywords at the beginning of titles rather than at the end. So instead of saying, find out about our delicious donuts by clicking here, you say, delicious donuts are one click away. Let's see a small change, massive difference. You can use meta descriptions as well that are interesting, and solid call to actions also get people to move. Remember I said it's sort of fractal, where every phase is made up of the 4 steps as well. Because once you've got their attention, you also want them to take an action to go and do the search, right? So that's why I refer to it as being fractal in its nature. Finally, you can list your blog and article content with authorship. The authorship is basically just there to create a bit of social proof. And simply put, The goal is to just get people to ask, what is it? I've prepared a little ad for you guys. Let me just play it from here. Okay, so I hope I've managed to spill some tea on your clothes today, some tea or coffee. So very simple, right? They have this beautiful meadow. They jump scare the crap out of you, and then like, oh look, we sell coffee in a can. That's it. That's a great example of attention. So attention grabbing design. Some design methods to achieve attention grabbing design, or how do you design attention grabbing content? On typography, obviously, big headlines. That's what we were saying before. Sliders and animations, so dynamic content pulls attention to those specific elements, and then finally strong imagery or even videos. So I think the layout and the format is pretty important, because if you've got a big wall of text that someone's got to read through and then scroll down and then they get to the interesting picture, I'm not sure that really works. But if you can put the headline first and then a picture and then ask them to read something, then they might be enticed to do so. Jonathan often talks about the value elements on a page and so on. That's exactly what John is talking about. The individual elements of the design can be utilized to draw the focus of the user to a specific part of the website or the page. So, for example, who's ever heard of color isolation? Color isolation theory? Yep, Julia, you know. Jono knows. Stuart knows. See, all the designers know. So if you've got a website that's predominantly blue and we make all the buttons red, why do we do that? Well, because red contrasts highly on blue. And so if everything's blue and I see this massive red button, my attention is going to be pulled towards that button. A little bit of dynamic animation. So when the person loads the page, the button vibrates a bit or moves around a bit or has a bit of a hover over effect. That's all ways that we get people to move towards the action that we want them to take, or to focus their attention where we want it. If Google wanted to make a lot of money, they should have people be able to pay to change the color of the headlines in Google Ads. Because if you've got the only headline that's red and everyone else's is blue, you will get 10 times the clicks than anyone else. Another good example of color and attention grabbing design was Coca-Cola when they came out with the first, not Diet Coke, because that existed before, but when they came out with the first Coke Zeros. You guys remember they made the caps black, and Coca-Cola had a massive problem because their shares just tanked. And they replaced the black caps with gray caps, so those silver ones, for Coca Light. And they replaced the Coke Zero caps with, still had the black caps, but they replaced the white Coke, or the Coca-Cola logo was actually pressed into it. And they replaced that with a red print. And go check that out, because when you're looking at the bottles, you can see the Coca-Cola bottles because the caps are actually different colors from the other brands. And so Coca-Cola spends a lot of time doing that because in their product design, there's actually an attention-grabbing element. The same thing with the bottle design. The original Coca-Cola bottle design was shaped like a female figure because it would attract more attention. Did you know that? If you look at a bottle of Coke, it's shaped like this. The old glass bottles, yeah, they're shaped like a woman's body because that would attract more attention. And so you can really bring these elements into a lot of different areas. It can be built into the product. It can be built into the advertising. But ideally, you would think about the entire business and what it's trying to sell as a customer journey and have the business be built around this whole process. Coca-Cola did that very, very successfully because they basically built the entire business just around that one product. And sure, later on, they added other products, but they built the entire business around that one product, and everything from the advert to the design of the product, everything was designed to follow this AIDA model. Worth noting, there are some negative connotations with having too many elements. So if you've got, let's say you start adding dynamic elements to a website or to a social post or whatever the case may be, if everything's moving, then it's no longer isolated and attention grabbing, but rather confusing. Because let's say you've got two elements that are trying to pull the user's attention. Which one are they choosing? And strangely, this is just how the human mind works. We can't focus on two things at the same time. Well, I know I can't. You guys know I don't multitask. People that say they multitask, they're just pretending, or they're female. And I understand that women multitask better than me. So So yeah, I still think that there's some going on there. There we go, Hayden. Yes, correct. The point is that people can really focus on more than one thing, especially in adverts. And that's why I often say, and why you'll hear Deline say, for example, reduce the amount of text, focus on the key elements, attract the attention that we need by simply focusing on that which is the most important. There's a famous saying about billboards, and this was one of the big billboarding guys in South Africa. I think the guy who started Continental Outdoor, just a big billboarding company. The quote that he put on all of their billboards was, remove every element that is not absolutely necessary, and then you'll have a successful billboard. And I really like that idea. So someone who's trying to do it right now is Pineapple Insurance. I don't think they're doing it very successfully, but they focused on this whole demarketing and saying, instead of giving you a 15-second ad, instead we're going to give you a 15-second break from ads. And they would just keep quiet. Yes, Sasha?
Did you see on LinkedIn, I don't know what they are trying to do, but they are now calling themselves broccoli. It's actually a very clever spin on what people don't like.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I haven't seen that on LinkedIn. Yeah, so I think that would be a great example of them taking their own brand and grabbing attention, because they started becoming part of the background noise, right? They literally became camouflaged. And that's what I think a lot about advertising is, when you've got all of these attention-grabbing adverts, then there would be this camouflage. There's actually an awesome clip. Let me see if I can find it and share it with you guys who watched the series Shameless. I can't find the video on short notice now, but there's a scene where he's at university and all of the university kids are doing this flash mob thing where they all, when the bell rings, they all like stand still and they're all like, freezing in place. The example that I've got here is Philip walks right through the middle of the flash mob. And so everyone's trying to do this special thing, but the only person standing out in that specific situation was actually Lip walking through the middle and not giving a shit. And something like Pineapple, they're trying to do it. Another good example of attention-grabbing advertising and marketing is Naked. I look at Naked Insurance and I'm just like, this is such a cheap wallet trick, but I'm pretty sure it's working. And all they're doing is attention, interest, desire, action, all in one very simple billboard. John got naked at the gym, right? That's a sentence that you just wouldn't read often. John got naked at the gym. Okay, whoa, that's crazy. Why did John get naked? Oh, okay, they meant he got naked insurance. Okay, interesting. So yes, humor. If we go back to the other slide, sorry, I won't do the jump scare video again, but it's surprising, right? What? He got naked at the gym. It's sort of delightful. Oh, he got naked at the gym. It's funny as well, but it's also a bit disgusting. How could someone get naked at the gym? And then it's creating that curiosity and saying, what do they mean? Oh, actually, Naked is the insurance company. Yes, Nando did it first. Nando's did do it first. Stuart, have you got an example of where Nando's did it? Because they actually did it a few times, but which one did you like?
They've got hundreds of them, but every time they used to get banned off the TV ads back in the day, now all their stuff is social media. But I mean, 90% of their posts are controversial on purpose. I mean, they aim to get their ads banned on TV. It was their goal at a stage, so that it would circulate virally off TV, which made one of their best marketing campaigns they've ever done.
Yeah, they're very good. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Nando's is actually short for Fernando, because one of the co-founders was named Fernando. When I heard that the first time, I was like, whoa, that's super obvious, but I never thought about it that way. I like the ad where the girl orders the chicken breast and chips combo, and then she's looking down and she's like, sorry, I think you forgot my chips. And then the waitress lady just pulls the plate out from below her cleavage. And like, that was a really good one too. And then the ad obviously proceeds to say, 2 succulent, juicy chicken breasts and a side of chips. And I remember, because the person who was working with me at the time, Ray, at the time I wasn't doing marketing, he was doing marketing, and he actually knew the actress played that commercial. And the scene at the end where she's trying to reach for the straw, I don't know if you guys remember this, and then she goes like, you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, that was not scripted. That was in between takes. The camera was still rolling and she actually struggled. She was nervous. And so they cut that and actually put it in the commercial to sort of drive home the whole dumb blonde stereotype. But I thought it was pretty cool. Okay, so attention grabbing technical features. How to get technical. Why do we focus on page load speed optimization? Well, the thing is, attention spans have grown even shorter. And if you can't serve a website in under 3 seconds, your bounce rate goes up astronomically. Who knows what our average bounce rate is in Xponent on our websites? Okay, so we maintain a very low bounce rate, but I think our average is below 50%, which is insane, because industry standard would be 70% or higher. Anything below 70% is great. We maintain below 50%. And I think the lowest one I've ever seen was something like 5%. At some point, I think SAGL was on like 2%.
Yeah.
And so that's a strong indicator that our websites load fast and that we're generating the right kind of traffic. To some extent, our bounce rate is too low. It means we're not grabbing enough attention, that we're probably missing some people. But that's a pretty good, like a high quality problem to have. But anyway, very important that we optimize the page load speed. That's really critical, because if you can't grab their attention within the first 3 seconds, they are far more likely to bounce. And also then, how do we measure the attention phase? I think organic traffic is pretty important for attention, because if you're gaining organic traffic without putting any ads out there, it means that your social media is grabbing the right attention. It means that your articles are being found and people are clicking on it and showing interest in the work that you're doing, or it's grabbing attention and then leading to interest. And so a good way to actually measure the ability for your website to generate attention, for all of your marketing material to generate attention, is actually to measure the interest and to see what percentage of that interest is actually bouncing. So if you're generating a lot of attention, then you'll generate a lot of traffic onto the website, whether it's organic or paid search traffic and so on. But then you need to ask, am I getting the right kind of attention? So in other words, am I attracting the right sort of audience? And that's going back to, remember, the 3 stages in phase 1: target market, key message, channels, and touch points, right? That's phase 1. So if my target market selection was accurate and my key messaging was right, then I'll see attention and I'll see interest. And then obviously social media views are a basic one, referrals, viral content, virality, and then obviously some display ads and how they perform will give you a very clear idea of whether or not you're generating good attention. So we focus a lot on year-on-year growth. So sort of longer term growth on specifically things like free traffic, like organic traffic through our articles. And that actually helps a lot because it makes your ads a little bit cheaper and more efficient as well. You should measure your paid search traffic, especially the impressions, click-throughs, and click-through rates. That's pretty important because that'll tell you, am I grabbing the right sort of attention? Reach in social media is pretty important too, but I know these metrics have changed and I haven't been a specialist in social media for a very long time. So I don't really have the authority to talk on that at this point, but I do work quite a bit in Google Ads. And I think what I would measure if I'm checking to see if my ads are grabbing the right sort of attention, I would ask, what are my impression rates and what are my click-through rates? Am I getting a lot of click-throughs? Am I getting a lot of impressions? Referral to the website through things like Facebook, especially if it's organic. We want to know, are people clicking through to the website after they've seen the content that we posted? And unfortunately, remember what I said earlier about camouflage. Unfortunately, we've hit a point where I'd say ads have become so sort of normalized that people are not going to pay attention to the first one that we make. Because it is a little bit abstract, but I think they'll get it. But if we keep adding this sort of humor and the things that grab the attention of users, I think that there's something to be said for sort of consistently doing that. I mean, I'm sure Nando's first ad wasn't as attention grabbing, even though it was probably as controversial as the rest of them. It was with time, Nando's actually built up a reputation. And now when the next Nando's ad comes out, people are actually looking forward to it. And so it grabs attention just for the sake that it grabbed attention in the past. And so there is a sort of a build-up of that. Sasha, through what you were saying with Pineapple, they sort of established themselves as a certain thing. And then they're now sort of changing that tack in order to prevent their sort of camouflage into the background, because their ads are not as attention grabbing as they were before. Okay, so we spoke about referral traffic, we spoke about impressions, we spoke about click-through rates. Okay, so let's say you're in a position where you're not grabbing attention, you're not getting the interest that you're looking for. We can fix the content and backlinks to try and fix the issue. So you're going to go to your content and say, why are people not interested in this? Why is it not grabbing attention? And then thinking of what would grab your attention, right? Or putting yourselves in the shoes of the person that you want to choose the brand. So that's usually going to be where the target audience comes in. And you ask yourself, what keeps this person up at night? And at this point, I'll bring in a little secret weapon that I've always asked. Whenever I'm making content, I ask myself the question, for what reason would this person lose sleep? Like, let's take a target audience, trying to target young Black males living in Tembisa. Okay, what do you think keeps them up at night? What do you think they're scared of? What do you think they're excited by? And obviously, you're making a lot of assumptions, but you have to start somewhere, right? So you try out some stuff, and then based on the data, you shift your style and you shift your stance and you shift your content. And that's how you fix it. So one of the things that I've always asked myself is, what keeps them up at night? And then I move that on to say, how do I join the conversation that's already going on in their mind? So without getting too philosophical, I'm sure that all of us have sort of a conversation that you're having with yourself all the time, right? You can read The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, all of that exists. You can go read it in your own time, but we're all more than one self, right? There's the subjective self that's riding behind your eyeballs. And then there's the objective self, which is thinking of you as a different person. So sort of objectively thinking about yourself. And there's a conversation going on between those two parts of you. And you're interacting with the world and you're thinking about things. And so how do I join that conversation? How do I become a participant in that conversation that's going on in the person's head? Right? There's a cool saying to say, I live rent-free in that person's head. How do we live rent-free in their heads? That's the question you should be asking. And if you play your cards right and you've done a good job at the marketing or at the attention and interest grabbing portion of this process, then you'll be in a position where you can say, I've joined the conversation going on in their head. It's ruminating with them, and that's going to lead them to the next phase, which is desire and action. And so I think a lot of brands try to do that. So for example, Bathroom Bazaar had that stupid catchy song, Come to Bathroom Bazaar. Yes, you guys remember that? That still lives rent-free in my head, and I refuse to buy anything from Bathroom Bazaar because I hate that song. And so they sort of achieved the opposite. They got my attention. They definitely got my interest, but it was negative interest. And the desire was actually soured because I don't care if their prices are the best. I hate that song, and it's been living in my head rent-free for the last 20 years. Because I heard that the first time when I was in high school. And so, yeah, when my dad built the house that we grew up in, that I was in when I was in high school, he let me know that they're busy choosing tiles and bathroom stuff at the moment. Do I want to come with him? And I said, sure. And he pulled into the new Bathroom Bazaar, and I said to him, there's no way. I'm not walking into that store. And I ended up convincing him to leave Bathroom Bazaar and go buy at a different place because I just hated that song so much. And so there are ways that you can actually mess it up and become negative, but it's definitely a better problem to have than just not having any attention at all. And so what I want to say is marketing is not always about being safe. You should try things. And if it fails, fail spectacular. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Rebecca Black had that song Friday, literally called the most hated song on the internet. Do you guys remember that?
Why would you bring that up?
Because she's an example of someone who courted all the wrong attention. She made the song, she had it produced by I think it was even P. Diddy or something. She even paid a rapper to be in there who destroyed his own career. Terrible situation for Rebecca Black. But she ended up getting contracted as a consultant for a big marketing company because she definitely had the ability to pull attention. She was just not applying that ability correctly. And there's another example of a kid in Australia that had a house party, and it ended up he advertised it so well that something like 1,000 people showed up at his house, and it was a huge problem. The cops had shut it down. And then he got a job with an events company, and he's 17, and he's working for a massive events company worldwide because of his ability to attract attention. I was thinking about Oppie Koppie yesterday. I don't know if you guys remember Oppie Koppie, but Oppie Koppie would always have these different themes, right? Wildebeest, Smoor Verlief, Way of the Dassie, all of these different Oppie Koppies. And the reason why they did that was because they needed somehow to say, not just, hey, it's Koppie 27, but rather to brand it in a way that would pull attention and to create a culture around it. And curiosity, what is Way of the Dassie? What do they mean by the Dassie? And they even got back then the Antwoord, which was at the time was called Max Normal, to write a whole song about the Way of the Dassie. And that was how they courted attention that year. So yeah, if you've got a ton of impressions, but you don't have any click-throughs, try and fix the browser page titles of the website. That's one way to do it, is to just go and fix the browser page titles. Moving on from that slide, I just want to say on the interest point, the idea is to get them, now that you've grabbed their attention, they're interested in it. The interest phase is really focused on one thing and one thing alone. It's to get them to say, I like it, and then to deliver the key message to them. So you want to explain the benefits, the features, and the advantages, but you don't want to do it with a massive paragraph of information, because who's got the time to read it? You need to be able to deliver it in the least possible time. Hayden and Julia and everyone that I've asked, why do you think I keep asking you to make videos shorter than 30 seconds? Because you lose interest if it's too long. I want all killer, no filler, right? It needs to be killer the whole time. And I know that's a challenge because we don't do marketing for just one company. We do it for a lot of companies. But that's our job. Our job is to think of interesting things. Our job is to think of attention-grabbing things. And our job is to condense information into the most bite-sized way. And yes, I'm going to use the standard example, but it is the best example. When Sony was talking about their Walkman, the first MP3 player, all of the other companies were talking about features and gigabytes, this and so many megabytes and everything. And Steve Jobs made it really simple. 1,000 songs in your pocket, straight. No other word was necessary. Simply 1,000 songs in your pocket, and he sold it. Yeah, Sasha says ads versus corporate videos is horses for courses. Okay, so very good point, right? So at the attention and interest phase, we're not trying to make an entire corporate video because we're not trying to create desire or action, but rather we're trying to court attention and seek interest. Like I explained in the beginning about the different sort of phases in a customer journey, the type of content you're going to put at the beginning and the type of content you're going to put at the end of the customer journey are completely different. Totally different stuff. I've explained cat string theory to everyone here. That's what I mean by don't just put the whole ball of twine in front of the cat, right? You need to give it a little bit, grab its attention, pull it away. That's the interest part. And then once you've got them playing, then you can start giving all of the information out. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people making in marketing. Like all the B2B companies make this mistake, is they treat every piece of content like it should describe everything. And it's a sort of entrepreneur's instinct to try and get the maximum benefit out of every rand that they're spending. And so what they'll do is, I'll say, please make me an ad. And then they'll say, oh, but the ad needs to have the attention grabbing portion. Oh, but the ad also needs to do all of the interest generating. Oh, but the ad also needs to describe all of my features. Oh, and why don't we put in that the company's 20 years old today? And why don't we put in that the founder's history was that he started collecting BMWs in 2019? And none of that's relevant because it doesn't serve the purpose. So we are closing off here. I'll just read through the notes quickly. So once we've grabbed the user's attention, we need to get them interested in what we're offering. At this stage, the goal is to get them to think. It is suggested that instead of communicating the features of our product or service, we explain how the features and advantages will benefit them. So that's the whole 1,000 songs in your pocket idea. So taking it from, okay, I've got your attention, to how will this make your life different? Remember, join the conversation that's going on in their mind already. The approach shifts the focus back to the user rather than the product or service, and enables the user to identify with it on a personal level, right? That's the naked insurance example. John got naked in the gym. Well, I go to the gym. Maybe I can get naked too. See how that works? Tracy got naked at the braai. Same thing. They're trying to appeal to different audiences. Coca-Cola does that with their products now, where they personalize the bottles. And so people will go in and buy a Coke just because it's got their name on it. So they're doing that very successfully. In terms of how we can approach this through design, it's all about clearly, succinctly presenting the benefits. So users will not want to read through paragraphs of the sales pitch in order to find what's in it for them. Rather, chunk the information into steps, lists, bullet points, icons. You can utilize that to quickly communicate information. In prospects, to compel them to act, we need to make sure that their affinity for the brand hits a certain threshold. The more aligned we are with their needs and values, the more likely we are to achieve success. When your content is informative, relevant, and interesting to read, people often visit your website and recommend it to others. And then just quickly going into the measurement here. So looking at measuring interest phase, We're looking at website visits, we're looking at the sources of traffic, and we're looking at the bounce rate again. Once we've collected the data about the interest phase, we can adjust a few things on the site. So we can spend more money on traffic that generally has high engagement. So we'll figure out like, oh, maybe a lot of the people that come from Facebook seem to sort of hang around on the website a bit, which is something that we could report on a bit more accurately. I think we could actually improve our reports on that phase or on that level. But you're really just looking at measuring the overall engagement on the website in our situation, because our website is where we pull the attention and the interest to. The combination of visits and bounce rate of the traffic will give you an indication. So the visits is obviously the number of sessions visitors have had on the website, and it's a proxy for the overall traffic. Traffic sources, so where are we getting this attention from? Search engines, stray ads, all of that. We want to know where it's coming from. And then we also want to see the bounce rate. So if they get to the website, but they're not engaging with the content, then we've lost their interest. Once we've collected the data in the interest phase, we can adjust a few things. So obviously spending more traffic on the right sources, review the traffic sources and see what's leading to low engagement rates, and then improving the measurement game will help you retain visitors. So the whole point here is to keep them on the site once you've got their interest. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to talk about desire yet. We can do that next week. I hope you guys have a fantastic day and that you learned something.